There's no sugarcoating it. That obviously, as of today, on December 15th, post week 15 of the NFL season, that the Dallas Cowboys season is more than likely over. As you see down below, the Dallas Cowboys need to win out, and Philadelphia needs to lose out in order for the Dallas Cowboys to have the hopes of getting into the playoffs. Last night's game was absolutely utterly embarrassing. Maybe it's just because I don't have high expectations for this team, but I didn't find myself like absolutely disappointed that they lost. It's kind of one of those seasons where I cover all these other teams in the NFL. And when you look across the landscape of the league, when you look at just the NFC in comparison to the Dallas Cowboys, like, this is not a good football team. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs. Now, I was somewhat riding on the Cowboys Kool-Aid a couple of weeks ago after coming off a huge Thanksgiving victory against the Chiefs. And I was telling myself, I was like, all right, the Cowboys could run the table, like they could make some noise. But I still had the back of my mind, and I said this, and I was like, kind of still an uphill battle. But I thought it was preferably doable. But man, did I understand the Lions' loss? Yes. But I really thought Dallas could run the table. And I did not think that 9, J.J. McCarthy, was going to be the person that just put an absolute nail in the coffin for the Dallas Cowboys playoff hopes. Cowboys fans, I bring you bad news. This team is not making the playoffs. They're a bad football team. And somebody cue on the tank memes. I know Jeff and everybody along with associated with DLLS Cowboys is already starting their draft talk. Vach Lombardi, Brian, they're about to start their draft talk. It's that time of the year, Cowboys fans. We got to accept it. This team is going to Cancun in 4 weeks, and they got a lot of things that they got to do in the upcoming weeks of the season, postseason as well, with free agency and all these other players. But let's just get to the task at hand. My takeaways from last night's game. Sunday Night Football, absolutely abysmal performance by the Dallas Cowboys. My main takeaway from Dallas' point of view. And I don't even have much to talk about when it comes to the Vikings. They're not making the playoffs. I've talked about J.J. McCarthy a multitude of times. He played relatively well yesterday. But he's not who I want to mainly talk about today. My team is who I want to talk about. After watching that game, I said to myself, there's no way they bring back Matt Eberflus. There's just no way. That defensive performance yesterday is absolutely abysmal. I know a lot of people were wanting to blame the Cowboys' offense for the reason why the Cowboys lost the game yesterday. I understand your argument. You know, they struggled in the red zone offensively. They gave up too much pressure with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott got sacked a couple times, really pressured a lot. I think that it was the most pressures he's had in his career. It was kind of alongside this. I don't know if that's 100% true, but the stat that I read coming from a couple of Cowboys beat writers, the stat was referably close to the stat they had last week where Dak had like one of the most pressures all season in his career, something along those lines. Went for too many field goals. But sometimes your defense just has to get stops. They have to. And this is a game where I did not have J.J. McCarthy looking like prime Peyton Manning with the zone fake on 4th down, his 4th or 3rd down, 1 or 2. I didn't have that on my bingo card yesterday. I didn't have Mr. 5th quarterback taken in the draft last year, drafting him top 12 in his draft class. A guy who all season has struggled. We've had all this controversy. I've talked about J.J. McCarthy a multitude of times this year. A guy in J.J. McCarthy who was supposed to be out with a high ankle sprain, ended up being out roughly, did it end up being around 8 weeks in favor for having Carson Wentz in, who absolutely got destroyed in that time span. He tore his labrum, had a knee injury, like his whole body just shut off. And they were in favor of rather playing him than J.J. McCarthy. Just a lot of bad stuff associated with this guy this year. He's not played good football. He's like on PFF, which I don't like their grading system to a certain degree, but they showed up last night. Out of the 32 quarterbacks graded in the NFL this season, he was 31. This game had, and Justin Jefferson last week had like 15 yards receiving. So this game was easily pointing towards the Cowboys defensively, like, yeah, we're going to be able to have a day and get some stops. That was not the case. In no world can people think that an offense has to score 30 points in a game just to be able to win. If that is the case, you are a bad football team. That situation really only worked for the Kansas City Chiefs the first couple of years under Patrick Mahomes and the years they were going to the Super Bowl. Their defense wasn't the greatest, but they were pretty much middle of the pack. Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, you had all these weapons. Andy Reid, the offensive mastermind that he was, they were able to score relatively 30 points a game. They were a part. That team was a part of one of the most historic Monday Night Football games of all time against Jared Goff in LA at the LA Coliseum, where both of them had 50 points in a game. And then you have the Rams, ironically, the greatest show on turf back in the 2000s. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not a recipe for good football, being a good football team. That's why only you can think of two teams being able to accomplish the feat of not having a phenomenal or even middle of the pack defense over the last 25 years of the NFL. The idea that people are putting all this pressure on Dak Prescott and the offense to relatively, in their minds, in their arguments, to be perfect is not the identity and the efficiency of having an elite and being considered an elite football team in the NFL. Look at a team that we're going to discuss later, the Broncos. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and their offense, let's be honest, isn't the greatest. But guess what? They're 12-2. They have clinched a playoff spot in the AFC playoff. They're in the driver's seat for the number 1 seed. The phrase defense wins championships is not an understatement. I know a lot of people started questioning this philosophy a couple of years ago because Patrick Mahomes was so great and that offense was so elite and they were able to win Super Bowls. But we saw what happened last year against Philadelphia. The year where the Chiefs played the Buccaneers and the Buccaneers defense absolutely suffocated Patrick Mahomes. The quote still lives. The philosophy has not changed, even with the evolution of our game. Defense wins championships, and the Cowboys do not have that. A lot of that has to do, again, with Matt Eberflus. The Cowboys blitzed. I cannot remember approximately the stat. I wrote down the contrary stat to it. I'm about to look it up just right again because I want to tell you guys the exact stat. Okay. Matt Eberflus's blitz rate. This is how many times he blitzed the last 2 weeks. In the first quarter, he blitzed 60% of the time. Yesterday, in last night's game, he blitzed the safety, Donovan Wilson, first play drive of the game, and forces an interception. In the second through the fourth quarter, he only blitzed 13%. Here was J.J. McCarthy last night statistically. Against zone, J.J. McCarthy was 10 for 14, 178 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Versus man coverage yesterday, he was 5 for 10, 72 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I guess you can classify the 1 interception that he threw on that blitz play, so it was a zone blitz. But either way, the idea is when you bring pressure with this defense, they've been successful. So they had J.J. McCarthy 5 for 10, 72 yards. But in contrary to when they played zone, J.J. McCarthy was absolutely carving him up. He averaged 20 yards a pass. That is what J.J. McCarthy did yesterday. J.J. McCarthy was 15 for 24, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that 1 interception. J.J. McCarthy had a really good day yesterday. Again, this Cowboys defense made J.J. McCarthy look like prime Peyton Manning with the whole zone fake. Nobody saw him, and he literally gritted into the end zone. Go back and look at the replay. He gritted into the end zone. That is what happened yesterday. And this was a game where Justin Jefferson didn't play well. Jefferson caught 2 passes for 22 yards. He had 8 targets. He had a couple throws that went through right in his hands, even a touchdown pass. Jordan Addison, 2 catches for 66 yards. And then they weren't even able to run the football very well. They ran for under 3 yards a carry. And yet in the passing game, they got absolutely boat raced. And this was really, and I posted this on Twitter while I was watching this game. This was like such an indictment against the front office, the decisions they've made, and the team that they've built, and the idea of trading away Micah Parsons, which I think will benefit in the future. But this lets you know, like, this team shouldn't make the playoffs, have no chance. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs, and that this defense is so anemic. In the fourth quarter, with roughly 3:12 to go in the game, Brian Schottenheimer throwing that challenge on the final drive with the fumble that Aaron Jones committed is just an indictment against how terrible this defense was. The Cowboys were so desperate for a turnover to just get the ball back. Couldn't stop Minnesota all day. They were so desperate for a stop that a play where Brian Schottenheimer, and I'm sure everyone in the replay booth and their whole squad, the Dallas Cowboys replay, whatever you want to call them, their job title that helps Brian Schottenheimer make these type of challenging decisions, whether to challenge this play or not. I'm sure they all saw that replay. Aaron Jones clearly was down on the ground, and the ball came out of his hands via contact of the ground. But Brian Schottenheimer was so desperate for a turnover because he knew his team could not get one that he would rather have used his final timeout by challenging that play and not saving it to try and just get a stop, use that timeout to have more chance and more time on the clock. He'd rather have done that. He wouldn't rather have done that. He would have rather threw that challenge than rather had that philosophy. That was an indictment against how bad that defense is in Dallas. They weren't good across the board. And it starts with Matt Eberflus. He's not a good defensive coordinator. Last year, the Bears, under his whole coaching stint, go back and look at the Bears' defensive stats. They were not a good defensive team. And for a guy in Matt Eberflus, who is supposed to be has a history of being a good linebackers coach, he's developed Shaquille Leonard and all these great linebackers, Sean Lee at the time when he was in Dallas. For him to be a linebackers coach, this has got to be one of the worst linebacking cores in the league. Taking away DeMarion Overshawn, he's had a brutal injury. It's going to take him another year to get it's going to take an off season and training camp, OTAs to get his football legs up under him. And it was just a tall ask and tall order for him to play super elite football this season. But when you got guys like Kenneth Murray, these project guys and Louis Fowl, like these young players that the Cowboys have invested in, they're not getting better. Like, this linebacking core is awful. There's multiple plays that they showed on Twitter yesterday. Cowboys beat writers were showing it where Kenneth Murray was not filling in the right holes. Like, this linebacking core has to be one of the worst in the league. So if you're Matt Eberflus and that is supposed to be your specialty, you have one of the worst linebacker units in the NFL. Like, they can't do anything well. They can't fit their run gaps. They can't cover. And you're playing this zone scheme, not playing enough man-to-man coverage to where you're playing against your defensive personnel strength. So I think they should move on for Matt Eberflus. There was a play where he rushed 3 on 4th and 3. The play where it was a good ball, back shoulder throw to Jalen Naylor. Siobhan Revel, pretty good coverage. But he only rushed 3, and J.J. McCarthy was able to get that throw off. It was just a whole lot of bad yesterday from the Cowboys' defensive point of view. And I can't blame it on offense. Yes, Dak and the offense was not good on third down. They were 2 for 12. But outside, if they would have not missed those 2 field goals, which are chip shots for Brandon Aubrey, they would have scored 32 points. 32 points should be good enough to win you a ball game. Dak Prescott was 23 for 38. Didn't turn the ball over. Pretty efficient. Javonte Williams averaged 6 yards a carry. And CD had 111 yards. Like, this offense was pretty efficient yesterday from a statistical standpoint. Outside of third down and things of that nature, like, they didn't turn the ball. They didn't play, and they weren't the reason why Dallas lost this game. If people are thinking that, they really need to people who are arguing this on their podcast, on TV, they should really just consider just pulling down the microphone, taking it out their hands, and just doing another job. There's no way you watched this game yesterday. And the takeaway from the Cowboys' perspective is, okay, this offense was abysmal yesterday. They're the reason why they lost, and that's why. There's no shot. And ultimately, it's draft time for the Dallas Cowboys. It's super imperative that both of these players they have with these first-round picks are studs. If we look across the defense, they need players everywhere. They definitely need a linebacker. I think that arguably is probably their number one need right now. They need an edge rusher, and they need a corner, and they need safeties. Like, they need everything. The Cowboys' path for success next season, I think the offense is pretty set. This is a Super Bowl caliber offense. The way you flip this defense is if you invest in key positions. I think they can find good safeties in free agency. I just think the important position that you really get right is if you get that edge rusher in the draft and get that linebacker. I think you can find decent corners. I don't know what you're going to do with Diggs. There's a lot of stuff to do in Dallas. Like, you got to hit on these draft picks. Like, you really, ideally what they need to do, you need to recoup some picks. I don't know how you can do that in this draft by just trading back in a couple rounds, getting more picks. Like Ryan Flournoy, and let's just give some kudos to Ryan Flournoy. The way he's been able to elevate his game and and just mature into the player that he's become. Like, we've seen the potential. Like, he's a great player, 6th-round talent. And he is just becoming a star. That's the type of talent Dallas needs to find on the defensive side of the ball in order to change this defense. I think they got good players built around Q. You're going to have Osa. You're going to have Kenny Clark. Ezra Raku, he's going to turn out to be a pretty good player. You have a good edge rusher to go along with your defense. You really need a corner. Definitely need a linebacker. And you need to get some safeties in free agency because Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker is not good enough to get the job done. But